Willow Creek, nestled deep within the remote rural outskirts of Kansas, is the kind of town easy to miss on any map. A small dot swallowed by vast, rolling plains stretching endlessly under an open sky. Its isolation is as much a part of its identity as the sun-baked earth and rusted farm equipment that dot the landscape. Streets lined with weathered wooden houses, each bearing the scars of decades exposed to unforgiving winds and relentless sunlight, paint a picture of quiet endurance. At a glance, Willow Creek might seem a peaceful place, a community where life moves slowly, neighbors greet each other by name, and the days are measured by the steady rhythm of nature's cycles. Yet, beneath this tranquil facade lies a tangle of secrets, simmering grudges, and unspoken fears that twist through the town like invisible roots, binding its residents in wary silence. At the very edge of this fractured town stands the Harper family farmhouse, a once proud relic now worn down by time and neglect. The peeling paint reveals cracked wooden boards that have weathered many storms, while patches of rusted tin have been slapped onto the sagging roof in a desperate attempt to keep out the elements. The surrounding fields have long been abandoned, overtaken by wild grasses and thorny weeds that claw hungrily at the perimeter of the property. Beyond the tangled overgrowth, the dense forest presses ever closer, its dark shadows harboring whispered tales and fears among the townspeople. The woods around Willow Creek have earned a sinister reputation. Stories of people vanishing without a trace, strange noises echoing through the night, and an eerie silence that falls suddenly and unnervingly. Children dare not wander into these trees alone, especially after dusk, for the forest is a realm of mystery and dread that no one dares to challenge. Within the walls of the Harper farmhouse lives Clara Harper, a 16-year-old girl whose very presence unsettles the few remaining inhabitants of Willow Creek. Her pale skin stands in stark contrast to the rugged environment, and her piercing gray eyes seem to look far beyond the ordinary, as if perceiving things hidden from everyone else. Clara moves with a deliberate quietness, her slender frame carrying the invisible weight of years marked by hardship and loneliness. Her clothes, often ill-fitting and worn, hang loosely around her, matching the frail but purposeful manner in which she navigates the world. There is a precision to Clara's every movement, a careful calculation born not of malice, but of necessity, as though each step must be measured against the harsh realities that have shaped her existence. Clara's life is steeped in tragedy and abandonment. Her father, Frank Harper, was known throughout Willow Creek as a skilled but troubled mechanic, a man whose talent for repairing engines was overshadowed by a volatile temper and a dependence on alcohol that fueled frequent outbursts of violence. The farmhouse bore witness to more than its share of these storms: broken furniture, shouted curses, and scars left not just on the home, but on the people within it. Years ago, Frank disappeared without explanation, vanishing into the wilderness that surrounded the town. His absence left a gaping wound in the Harper household and sent ripples through the community, sparking rumors that ranged from the tragic to the sinister. Some said he had finally been claimed by his demons. Others feared he had been swallowed by forces unknown in the dark woods. Not long after her father's disappearance, Clara's mother also vanished, leaving the girl entirely alone amidst the decaying walls and encroaching wilderness. The official story told of a woman fleeing a broken home, but whispers among the townsfolk hinted at darker truths. Of a woman driven to despair, or worse, claimed by the same shadow that had taken Frank. No definitive answers ever came, and Clara was left to forge a path of survival on her own, navigating a world where protection and guidance were absent. This solitude has carved deep grooves into Clara's character. Without the shelter of family, she became fiercely independent yet guarded, her emotions tightly sealed beneath a calm and distant surface. The people of Willow Creek look upon her with a mixture of pity and suspicion, unsure whether to see her as a victim battered by fate or a figure to fear and avoid. At school, Clara is a ghost, present but unseen, slipping silently through crowded halls filled with laughter and light that seem no longer meant for her. Her pale face and unyielding gaze mark her as different, the subject of whispered conversations and cautious glances. She speaks little, but when she does, her words carry a weight beyond her years, leaving teachers and classmates alike unsettled. The woods that edge the Harper property are Clara's refuge, Where others see danger, she finds solace, a sanctuary where the judgmental eyes of the town cannot reach her. She spends long hours by a stagnant creek winding through the trees, her thoughts wandering dark and complex paths she dares not speak aloud. Clara collects remnants of the forest's creatures, bird skulls, deer antlers, the bones of stray cats, and arranges them with a reverence that borders on ritual, placing these tokens in hidden patterns across the forest floor. To Clara, these are not symbols of death, but fragments of a secret puzzle, pieces of a hidden world she is compelled to understand. Clara Harper's existence in Willow Creek is one of quiet isolation, shadowed by a growing darkness. The dilapidated farmhouse and encircling woods are more than just her home. They are the stage upon which her story unfolds. A tale woven with loss, resilience, and an unsettling presence lurking just beneath the surface. As the town continues unaware, the shadows around Clara deepen, hinting at a coming storm that threatens to shatter the fragile peace of Willow Creek and forever alter the lives entwined within its borders. At Willow Creek High, Clara Harper existed as both a tangible presence and an elusive mystery, occupying the back row of classrooms with an intensity that set her apart from every other student. She was rarely noticed in the clamor of adolescence, the laughter, the whispered secrets, the casual exchanges that filled the halls and classrooms. But when she was, it was for her unsettling quietude and the unsettling focus she held on subjects that others instinctively avoided. Her gaze, a piercing shade of cold gray, rarely lifted from the worn, dog-eared textbooks she clutched, volumes dense with forensic science, pathology, and the stark realities of death and decomposition. To Clara, these pages were not morbid fascinations, but gateways to understanding the fragile boundary between life and its inevitable end. The whispers that trailed her through the school corridors were tinged with a mix of fear, fascination, and contempt. The other students coined names for her that echoed the town's unease: the Shadow Girl, the Ghost of Willow Creek, or, more cruelly, the Quiet Freak. These epithets encapsulated the gulf between Clara and her peers, a gap widened by her unapproachable demeanor and the aura of silence she carried like a shield. She spoke little, if at all, preferring the solace of solitude over social interaction. When her gray eyes met those of other students, they did not reflect youthful curiosity or innocence, but instead held a penetrating sharpness, as if seeing through facades to the darkest secrets and fears lurking beneath. Such looks unsettled even the most confident classmates, prompting them to avoid her gaze and, by extension, Clara herself. Despite the social ostracization, Clara's intellectual prowess was undeniable. Her academic record shone brightest in biology and chemistry, disciplines where she could channel her keen intellect into the meticulous study of life's inner workings and its eventual decay. Her teachers regarded her as a prodigy of sorts, impressed by her razor-sharp logic and dedication. Yet even they sensed a profound emotional distance. Clara's interactions were clinical. Her answers to questions came without hesitation, but also without warmth. There was a chilling vacancy in her expressions, a void where youthful enthusiasm and emotional engagement might otherwise have blossomed. This emotional detachment rendered her a spectral figure in the classroom, respected for her knowledge, but isolated by the coldness that seemed to envelop her. Outside the confines of the school, Clara's life was no less cloaked in mystery. The dense woods surrounding the Harper farmhouse were her refuge, a place where the superstitions and whispered fears of Willow Creek held sway, but failed to reach her. These woods, with their gnarled, towering trees, whose branches intertwined like skeletal fingers against the sky, were a realm forbidden to most local children. The forest floor was carpeted in dappled shadows, where faint shafts of light fought through the dense canopy, creating an eerie interplay of brightness and gloom. For the other youths, the woods were the setting for dares and ghost stories. For Clara, they were sanctuary, silent and still, allowing her mind to wander freely away from the prying eyes and judgment that awaited beyond the tree line. In the solitude of this shadowed world, Clara engaged in quiet rituals that mystified and disturbed the townspeople who occasionally glimpsed her through the trees. She collected natural remnants, animal bones whitened by sun and rain, delicate feathers caught in the brush, skulls of small mammals and birds, and even the occasional remains of stray cats. These were not trophies of morbidity, but sacred fragments of a puzzle she yearned to assemble. She would carefully arrange these relics into intricate patterns hidden away from any human eye, a silent language of order and meaning that reflected the same cold logic she admired in her textbooks. Each formation was an expression of a deeper understanding, a communion with life and death woven into the fabric of the natural world. The townspeople rarely caught more than a fleeting glimpse of Clara's forest wanderings, but the rumors that surfaced were enough to add to her growing legend. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the pale girl who disappeared for hours into the woods, returning with dirt smeared across her clothes and an unsettling glint in her eyes. This silent bond with the forest deepened the chasm between Clara and the community. She became less a girl of Willow Creek and more a part of the shadowed wilderness itself. While other teenagers sought connection and belonging in their peers, Clara sought answers in the cryptic dance of decay and transformation, finding in the macabre a rare sense of control and purpose amid the chaos of abandonment and loss. As months turned into years, Clara maintained this dual existence with an eerie equilibrium. At school, she was the brilliant yet distant scholar, excelling in her studies while remaining untouchable emotionally. In the forest, she was a solitary figure piecing together secrets hidden in bones and shadows, a young mind obsessed with the ultimate mysteries of mortality. To the outside observer, Clara Harper was a paradox, a living enigma wrapped in layers of intellect and darkness, a girl whose fragile exterior masked a deep entanglement with the unsettling truths of life's end. To the townsfolk, she was a ghost in the making, forever lingering at the edges of their understanding, a shadow haunting the boundaries between the known world and the secrets best left unspoken. One dry summer night under a sky heavy with the heat and stillness of the season, the Harper farmhouse was consumed by flames. The fire swept through the aged wooden structure with terrifying speed, the dry timbers and weathered shingles igniting like kindling. Neighbors rushed to the scene, their shouts mingling with the crackling roar of the fire, as volunteer firefighters battled to contain the blaze. The official explanation was an accident. An overturned oil lantern in Frank Harper's cluttered workshop, left unattended in his usual state of intoxication. Yet despite this explanation, whispers and uneasy glances accompanied the smoke that billowed into the night sky. Some townsfolk wondered if something more sinister had sparked the inferno, a deliberate act hidden beneath the veil of misfortune. When the flames had devoured nearly everything, leaving behind only blackened beams and smoldering ashes, Clara Harper was found outside the house. She sat quietly on the scorched earth, her knees drawn up to her chest, her pale skin streaked with soot and grime. Her gray eyes, sharp and unblinking, gazed not at the destruction, but into some distant, unknowable place. There was no sobbing, no cries of loss, only a chilling calmness that unsettled those who looked upon her. Neighbors and respondents alike remarked on her strange stillness, a demeanor so detached and composed that it seemed unnatural for a girl who had just lost her home and the father she barely knew. This absence of visible grief added fuel to the growing speculation that the fire was not mere happenstance. In the wake of the devastation, Clara became effectively homeless, left to navigate a world abruptly stripped of stability and security. The town, out of a mixture of guilt, pity, and lingering fear, provided what aid it could. A small, weathered camper was parked on the edge of the Harper property's burnt remains, a meager shelter for a girl left adrift. Food and supplies were delivered sporadically by reluctant hands, offerings often accepted without gratitude or thanks. Clara's interactions with the townsfolk were limited and perfunctory. She rarely spoke, and when she did, her words carried an unsettling weight, as if she understood more than she let on. The distance she maintained deepened, turning the camper into a fortress around her fragile and enigmatic existence. But the Clara that emerged from the ashes was changed. shaped by fire and loss into something darker and more impenetrable. Her once delicate features seemed sharpened, her gray eyes gleaming with a cold, predatory intelligence that unnerved even those who barely knew her. Her movements, once uncertain and withdrawn, gained a calculated purposefulness, as if every step was measured and deliberate. The forest surrounding her home, a place she had long used as a refuge, now bore the marks of her silent dominion. She wandered its shadowed depths with ease, invisible and unchallenged, gathering the secrets of the land as though it were her rightful domain. Shortly after Clara took up residence in the camper, strange occurrences began to ripple through Willow Creek. Pets and small animals, dogs, cats, chickens, started to vanish without explanation. One by one, beloved companions disappeared, their absence noticed and mourned, but no trace was ever found. The townspeople whispered nervously about the growing pattern of losses, their voices tinged with fear and suspicion. Eyes would furtively glance toward the camper, where Clara dwelled on the fringe of their lives. More than one observer swore they saw her pale eyes gleam with an unnatural light when the subject of the missing animals arose in conversation, a spark of something dark flickering behind her gaze. Some townsfolk dared not speak her name aloud, fearful that doing so might invite misfortune. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's isolation became nearly complete. The camper, once merely a shelter, morphed into a sanctuary and a prison, sealing her off from the world while simultaneously fostering the shadows that now clung to her. The girl who had been whispered about as the quiet loner at school now carried an aura of menace that permeated the very air of Willow Creek. Her presence was felt rather than seen, a lingering chill, a silence that fell when she passed by, a sense of watching eyes in the woods. Children ceased daring each other to venture near the burned property, their youthful bravado quelled by an instinctive dread. Even adults crossed the street rather than approach, speaking of Clara in hushed tones with a mixture of fear and fascination. In solitude, Clara honed the strange rituals she had begun in her childhood, deepening her connection to the macabre elements of her environment. The bones, feathers, and remnants she collected in the forest grew in number and complexity, arranged with a precision that suggested both reverence and obsession. Each piece seemed to whisper a story, a fragment of the unseen narrative Clara sought to understand. Her nightly wanderings grew longer and more purposeful, moving further into the dark heart of the woods, where ancient trees stood as silent sentinels over secrets long forgotten. The once vibrant land around Willow Creek was slowly succumbing to a growing stillness, a quiet that spoke of watchful eyes and unspoken threats. Despite the outward quiet, a tempest brewed beneath the surface, one that would soon break with devastating force. The fragile peace of Willow Creek, already shaken by loss and suspicion, teetered on the brink of collapse. Clara Harper, the girl who had survived fire and abandonment, was becoming something more than a victim. In the depths of her solitude, in the gathering shadows of the night, a transformation was taking root. The pale girl with the penetrating gray eyes was no longer merely a child, but a force entwined with the dark pulse of the land itself. As the wind whispered through the scorched fields and the trees creaked beneath the weight of unseen watchers, the people of Willow Creek had yet to grasp the storm that loomed on their horizon. A storm that carried the cold fire of revenge and the silent promise of reckoning. Willow Creek's long-standing tranquility began to unravel under the weight of a chilling series of accidents and deaths that stirred unease deep within the hearts of its residents. The once predictable rhythms of daily life were disrupted by inexplicable tragedies that seemed to weave a dark thread through the fabric of the town's existence. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, with the discovery of Old Man Harlan's prized mule lying lifeless in its pen, its body strangely contorted and bearing marks inconsistent with a natural death. The town whispered of mishap and disease, yet those who tended the animals spoke in hushed tones about the mule's final moments, how it had appeared restless in the days before its death, how the water trough had been inexplicably emptied the night before, and how faint traces of a bitter, unnatural scent lingered around the pen. Shortly thereafter, the town librarian, a beloved figure who had served the community quietly for decades, collapsed suddenly in the middle of the library aisles. The doctors found no conclusive cause, no signs of heart attack, stroke, or infection. Her death was as mysterious as it was untimely. Townspeople, already rattled, began to connect the dots, even as Sheriff Grant Wilson urged caution, reminding them that coincidences do occur. Still, unease seeped into every corner of Willow Creek. Soon after, several drifters, transient workers passing through on their way to somewhere else, vanished without a trace. Some left behind belongings, others disappeared mid-conversation. No bodies were found, no clues offered to explain their disappearances. These incidents, though isolated on the surface, began to build into a tapestry of dread that hung thick in the humid Kansas air. Sheriff Grant Wilson, a man known for his steady hand and unshakable calm, found himself drawn inexorably into the swirling mystery. A veteran lawman with years of service to the county, he approached each case with methodical diligence, refusing to let superstition cloud his judgment. Yet, the mounting evidence was impossible to ignore. As he revisited each scene and interviewed witnesses anew, subtle connections began to emerge, links that seemed to point toward one name: Clara Harper. His investigation uncovered disturbing details that chilled him to the bone. At the mule's pen, traces of chemical compounds were detected in the water trough, poisons that required knowledge and careful preparation. Machinery on several farms had been tampered with in ways designed to cause accidents, subtle sabotage leaving few obvious signs, but enough to make failure inevitable. When searching Clara's small camper and the nearby woods she frequented, Sheriff Wilson found cryptic notes and diagrams scribbled hastily on scraps of paper. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. These notes contained references to plants with toxic properties, chemical recipes, and unsettling sketches that mapped the town with alarming precision. He found lists of names, dates, and times, details too calculated to be mere fantasy. As Sheriff Wilson delved deeper, the atmosphere in Willow Creek shifted palpably. The townsfolk, once neighborly and open, began to close ranks in quiet fear. Doors were bolted long before sunset. Windows shuttered against the creeping darkness. Children, once carefree in their play, ceased their adventures in the surrounding woods, eyes darting nervously at shadows. The woods themselves seemed to hold their breath, the trees standing silent and watchful, as if guarding secrets better left untouched. Murmurs spread about Clara's pale, haunting figure, how she seemed to glide through the town unnoticed yet always present, how her sharp gray eyes held a cold, assessing gaze that made onlookers shudder. Some claimed they had heard strange noises near her camper, whispers that carried on the wind, faint chants melding with the rustling leaves. Despite the growing terror, the town's desire for normalcy clung stubbornly to the surface. Business continued, albeit with an edge of caution, and church pews filled on Sunday mornings with congregations seeking solace. Yet beneath this veneer, fear gnawed relentlessly at the community's core. People whispered in back rooms and at kitchen tables, wondering what forces were at play and who would be next. Sheriff Wilson, aware of the mounting hysteria, redoubled his efforts, spending long nights poring over evidence and tirelessly chasing leads. He understood that the stakes were higher than ever. The fragile peace of Willow Creek threatened not just by chance, but by a dark and deliberate hand. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, the tension became almost unbearable. The town seemed caught in a suffocating grip, its heartbeat quickening in anticipation of an unseen reckoning. Each new tragedy was not seen as an isolated event, but as a part of a sinister pattern too vast and intricate for most to comprehend. Clara Harper, once a solitary and misunderstood girl, was now the focal point of a community's terror and suspicion. Her pale eyes, sharp and unyielding, reflected the darkness that had taken root beneath the surface of Willow Creek, a darkness that Sheriff Grant Wilson feared might consume them all before the truth could be unearthed. Sheriff Grant Wilson's pursuit of truth had evolved into a relentless obsession. Each thread he pulled unraveled more of the dark tapestry woven quietly in the shadows of Willow Creek, revealing the cold calculations behind the string of tragedies that had gripped the town in fear. For months, he had watched Clara Harper from a distance, piecing together the fragments of her daily life and the sinister patterns hidden beneath her quiet exterior. The mystery of the vanished animals, the suspicious accidents, and the creeping dread in the townspeople's eyes all led him inexorably to a single focal point: Clara's camper, an unassuming metal box parked on the edge of the neglected Harper property, like a silent sentinel overlooking the vast, lonely fields. When the sheriff finally stood before the trailer on a bleak autumn evening, the air was thick with tension, a tangible heaviness that pressed on his chest as though warning him away. The trees around rustled with a restless whisper, and the fading light cast long, uneasy shadows that seemed to stretch out like skeletal fingers reaching for him. Inside, the camper was a stark contrast to the barren landscape outside. Its cramped walls were plastered floor to ceiling with a macabre collage, faded photographs of the townsfolk, yellowing newspaper clippings chronicling the deaths and disappearances, and crude maps of Willow Creek marked with blood-red strings crisscrossing the surface like the veins of some living organism. Names circled in jagged handwriting, dates meticulously noted beside them. The room felt suffocating, a shrine to a mind consumed by vengeance and control. Every detail reflected an unnerving clarity of purpose, an intelligence honed not by hope, but by pain and bitterness. Sheriff Wilson moved cautiously through the cramped space, each step echoing hollowly against the metal walls. The disarray betrayed no signs of recent disturbance. Everything was as though frozen in time, preserved by the obsessive hand that had crafted it. His eyes caught the cold, calculating gaze of Clara Harper as she emerged silently from the shadows of a back corner. Her pale face was illuminated by the faint glow of a flickering lantern, her gray eyes unblinking and unnervingly serene. There was no fear, no panic in her expression, only a chilling calm that unsettled even the seasoned lawman. Without hesitation, Clara spoke of her motivations, her voice measured and devoid of remorse. She described a personal crusade, a warped sense of justice born from years of suffering and neglect. The torment inflicted upon her by her fractured family and the judgmental whispers of the town had shaped her into both victim and avenger. To her, each death was a release, a necessary cleansing of the rot she perceived eating away at Willow Creek's core. She saw herself not as a monster but as a liberator, freeing herself and others from pain through calculated acts of retribution. Her words were unsettlingly coherent, revealing a mind sharpened by trauma yet coldly detached from the human cost of her deeds. Sheriff Wilson attempted to warn her of the consequences, to plead for reason in the face of the destruction she had wrought and intended to continue. He spoke of justice, of the lives shattered and families torn apart, yet Clara's gaze remained steady, unmoved by his appeals. In that moment, he realized that this confrontation was not a battle of wills that could be won with words or authority. Clara Harper had become a force of nature, driven by an ideology that defied logic and mercy. As darkness swallowed the camper and the woods beyond, Clara vanished into the night with a predator's grace. The sheriff called for backup, but by the time others arrived, only echoes and the faint rustle of leaves remained. Days passed with no sign of Clara's return, and then the unthinkable happened. Sheriff Wilson himself disappeared. His patrol car was found abandoned near the edge of the forest, its engine cold and the keys still in the ignition. The town was left paralyzed. The last bastion of order vanished without explanation, swallowed by the same shadow that had consumed so many before him. Panic swept through Willow Creek like a wildfire. Neighbors barricaded their doors, children were kept indoors, and an oppressive silence fell over the town. Without their sheriff, the community was defenseless against the growing menace lurking in the dense woods. Rumors flourished. Whispers of the sheriff's fate mingled with dark tales of Clara's continued presence, stalking unseen but ever present. The fragile veneer of safety shattered, replaced by an ever-thickening fog of fear and uncertainty. In the weeks that followed, the town's heartbeat slowed to a wary crawl. The woods, once a place of whispered legends and youthful dares, became a forbidden zone, a dark frontier where no one dared tread. The shadow of Clara Harper stretched long and wide, a chilling reminder that some darkness cannot be contained or easily understood. Sheriff Grant Wilson's disappearance was more than the loss of a man. It was the symbolic end of a desperate struggle, marking the point at which Willow Creek surrendered to a creeping, silent terror. The saga of Willow Creek entered a new chapter, one where the boundary between hunter and hunted blurred, and the past's sins cast long, unyielding shadows over the present. In the hollow silence left behind, the question lingered like a cold wind. Who truly held power in this forgotten town? The law that once guarded it, or the darkness that had claimed it? Years slipped by in Willow Creek, but the town was never the same. The burned remains of the Harper farmhouse, once a humble home surrounded by fields and forest, now stood as a crumbling, charred monument to the horrors that had unfolded there. The skeletal structure leaned precariously, with blackened beams jutting out against the sky like the fingers of some ancient, forgotten specter. Overgrown weeds and thorny brush clawed their way around the ruins, and a heavy silence hung in the air, an unspoken warning to any who might dare approach. Locals passed by without a glance, quickening their steps, their conversations hushed whenever the name Harper was mentioned. Tourists who wandered off the beaten path to explore the rustic landscapes of rural Kansas soon learned of the place's grim reputation and steered clear, respecting a boundary set by fear and superstition. The forest surrounding Willow Creek had transformed into a landscape of eerie mysteries and whispered folklore. Strange symbols, etched crudely but deliberately into the bark of ancient trees, appeared deeper within the woods. These markings, simple circles intersected by jagged lines, cryptic shapes that seemed almost ritualistic, fueled local legends that had taken root like poison ivy. Stories told by older residents and passed down with reverence spoke of a pale girl with piercing gray eyes who haunted the forest's edge. Some claimed she was a restless spirit doomed to wander for eternity. Others whispered she was a witch, a dark soul bound to the land by the vengeance of the wronged. Children dared one another to venture close to the haunted grove, only to flee at the slightest sound, their imaginations spinning tales of spectral sightings and chilling laughter carried by the wind. The presence of Clara Harper had transcended her mortal existence, morphing into a haunting myth woven tightly into the fabric of Willow Creek's identity. Disappearance after disappearance continued to haunt the community, sporadic and unexplained, each case gnawing away at the fragile sense of security that remained. Travelers passing through, drifters seeking refuge, even locals were not immune to the creeping darkness. A hiker lost in the woods, never to be found. A transient who vanished without a trace after checking into a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. A hunter who set out at dawn but failed to return as dusk settled. The pattern, though infrequent, was unmistakable to those who watched closely. The forest seemed to swallow those who dared to cross its threshold, as if it were a living entity protecting its secrets. The townsfolk locked their doors tighter, installed extra lights, and kept their children close, eyes darting nervously whenever the sun dipped below the horizon. Fear had seeped into the bones of Willow Creek, turning familiar paths into foreboding corridors and friendly faces into wary strangers. Clara Harper herself had become an elusive shadow, her fate a mystery that hovered on the periphery of the town's collective consciousness. Some believed she had fled deep into the wilderness, choosing exile over capture. Others speculated she perished within the labyrinth of trees, claimed by the very darkness she had embraced. A few whispered of glimpses, a fleeting figure moving silently through moonlit glades, a pale face reflected in a stagnant pool, a pair of cold eyes watching silently from the thickets. These sightings, though never confirmed, kept the legend alive, intertwining fact and fiction until the line between them blurred completely. The girl who had once lived among them had become a ghostly presence, an enduring symbol of the town's shattered innocence and lingering dread. The story of Willow Creek stands as a stark and sobering testament to the destructive power of trauma and isolation. It reveals how unaddressed pain and festering darkness can metastasize, poisoning not just individuals but entire communities. The scars left by Clara's descent into shadow did not heal with time. Instead, they calcified into a legacy of fear and suspicion that cast a long, cold shadow over every corner of the town. Trust eroded, friendships frayed, and the simple rhythms of rural life were forever disrupted. Willow Creek's residents carried this burden silently, haunted by memories they wished to forget but could not, as the embers of that fateful fire smoldered quietly beneath the surface of their daily lives. Yet, beyond the fear and sorrow, the tale serves as a cautionary reminder, a warning that darkness, once born, is not easily extinguished. It thrives in silence, grows in neglect, and spreads in the spaces where understanding and compassion fail to reach. The Haunting of Willow Creek is not just a story of one girl or one town. It is a reflection of the fragile human condition, the shadows we all carry within, and the consequences when those shadows are left the embers may have cooled, but the fire's mark remains, etched deeply into the heart of Willow Creek, a place forever changed, forever haunted, forever waiting for a dawn that may never come.